Good day. Just returned from the river crossing.
Welcome back. I trust the journey was smooth?
Indeed, the weather held.
Wonderful.
Subscribe to Wild West Soul Stories. Hit the bell, like, comment, and share. Thanks for watching.
The morning sun rose slowly over the dusty town of Cedar Hollow, painting the wooden buildings in shades of amber and gold. Eleanor Hayes stood at the window of the small house she had called home for all 32 years of her life, watching the townspeople begin their daily routines. The baker opened his shop. The blacksmith fired up his forge. Young couples walked arm in arm toward the general store, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. Eleanor turned away from the window, a familiar ache settling in her chest. She had watched this scene countless times, always from the outside, always alone. Her reflection caught in the small mirror by the door, and she paused for just a moment. Brown hair pulled back in a simple bun, a face that was neither beautiful nor ugly, just ordinary. A face that nobody seemed to notice. She had spent the last 12 years caring for her mother, watching as the illness slowly stole her away piece by piece. When her mother had finally passed just 6 months ago, Eleanor had felt grief so deep she thought she might drown in it. But alongside that grief came another realization, one that crept in during the quiet nights when she sat alone in the empty house. She was 32 years old, unmarried, and likely to remain that way forever. The young men of Cedar Hollow had married the young women years ago. The few widowers in town had their eyes on the pretty widow Henderson, or the school teacher Miss Patterson. Nobody looked at Eleanor Hayes, the woman who had spent her youth changing bedsheets and grinding medicine into powder. She did not blame them. She did not blame anyone. This was simply her life, and she had made peace with it. Or at least she told herself she had. Eleanor grabbed her shawl and the basket she used for shopping. The larder was nearly empty, and she needed flour and eggs. She stepped out into the bright morning, squinting against the sunlight, and began her walk toward the center of town. Cedar Hollow was not a large town, but it had everything a person needed. A general store run by the Whitmore family, a church with a steeple that could be seen for miles, a schoolhouse where children learned their letters and numbers, a saloon that Eleanor had never entered and never would. And beyond the town, stretching out toward the purple mountains on the horizon, were the ranches that gave Cedar Hollow its livelihood. The largest of these belonged to the Cooper family, though now only one Cooper remained. Samuel Cooper had inherited the ranch when his father passed 5 years ago, and he had run it alone ever since. Eleanor knew him, of course. Everyone in Cedar Hollow knew everyone else. He was a quiet man, tall and broad-shouldered, with kind eyes and hands rough from honest work. He came into town every few weeks for supplies, nodded politely to those he passed, and went about his business without much conversation. Eleanor had spoken to him perhaps a dozen times in her entire life, brief exchanges about the weather or the price of grain. Nothing memorable, nothing special. She pushed open the door of the general store and stepped inside, the smell of leather and dried herbs greeting her like an old friend. Mrs. Whitmore stood behind the counter, wrapping a package for another customer, and Eleanor waited patiently near the display of fabric bolts. The bell above the door rang again, and Eleanor glanced over her shoulder. Her breath caught just slightly when she saw Samuel Cooper enter the store. He removed his hat as he stepped inside, running a hand through his dark hair, and his gaze swept the room before landing on her. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, certainly, but something else too. Something Eleanor could not name. He nodded to her. She nodded back. Then she turned her attention to the fabric, pretending to examine a bolt of blue cotton that she had no intention of buying. Mrs. Whitmore finished with her customer and turned to Eleanor with a warm smile. They discussed flour and eggs and whether the summer had been too dry for the crops. Eleanor paid for her purchases and placed them carefully in her basket, aware the entire time that Samuel Cooper was somewhere behind her, moving quietly through the aisles. She was nearly to the door when his voice stopped her. "Miss Hayes." Eleanor turned, surprised. Samuel stood a few feet away, his hat clutched in his hands, his expression uncertain. She had never seen him look uncertain before. "Mr. Cooper," she said, "good morning." "Good morning." He cleared his throat. "I was sorry to hear about your mother. I meant to say so sooner, but—" He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "Thank you," Eleanor said softly. "That is kind of you." An awkward silence stretched between them. Eleanor shifted her basket from one arm to the other, unsure what else to say. She was about to bid him good day and continue on her way when he spoke again. "I was wondering," he said, the words coming slowly as if each one required great effort, "if you might like to have dinner. With me, I mean. At the ranch. I am not much of a cook, but I thought perhaps—" He stopped, his face flushing red beneath his sun-browned skin. Eleanor stared at him, certain she had misheard. Samuel Cooper was asking her to dinner. She, Eleanor Hayes, the plain spinster who had spent her best years tending to the sick? She did not know what to say. Her heart was beating strangely fast. "You do not have to answer now," Samuel said quickly. "I know it is sudden. I just thought maybe you might like some company. After everything you have been through." He looked down at his boots, then back up at her. "But if you would rather not, I understand completely." "No," Eleanor heard herself say. "I mean yes. I would like that. Dinner, I mean." The uncertainty melted away, replaced by a smile so warm and genuine that Eleanor felt it like sunlight on her skin. "Tomorrow evening?" he asked. "I could come fetch you at 5 o'clock, if that suits." "That suits," Eleanor whispered. He nodded, still smiling, and placed his hat back on his head. "Until tomorrow, then, Miss Hayes." She watched him walk out of the store, her mind spinning. What had just happened? Why would Samuel Cooper, owner of the largest ranch in the territory, want to have dinner with her? It made no sense. Nothing about this made any sense. Eleanor walked home in a daze. She spent the rest of the day and all of the next in a state of nervous anticipation, changing her dress 3 times before Samuel arrived in his wagon. He helped her up with a gentle hand, and they rode in companionable silence toward his ranch, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The Cooper Ranch was beautiful, well-kept and prosperous despite having only one man to run it. Samuel led her inside the house, where a simple but delicious meal awaited them. Roast chicken, fresh bread, vegetables from his own garden. He had clearly put great effort into everything. They talked as they ate. Really talked, for the first time ever. Samuel asked about her mother, about her childhood, about the books she liked to read. He listened with genuine interest, his eyes never leaving her face. And, slowly, Eleanor began to relax. She told him about the dreams she had once had, of traveling to see the ocean, of filling a house with children and laughter. She told him about the quiet acceptance she had found in letting those dreams go. "Why did you let them go?" Samuel asked softly. Eleanor looked at him in surprise. "Because they were not meant to be. I am 32 years old, Mr. Cooper. My time for such things has passed." Samuel set down his fork. His expression was strange, almost pained. "May I tell you something, Miss Hayes? Something I have never told anyone?" Eleanor nodded, her heart beginning to beat faster again. "I have loved you for 15 years. The words hung in the air between them. Eleanor could not move, could not speak. She was certain she had misheard. "I was 17 when I first saw you," Samuel continued, his voice low and steady. "You were helping your mother hang laundry behind your house. The wind caught one of the sheets and wrapped it around you, and you laughed. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard." He paused, swallowing hard. "I told myself I would speak to you someday, that I would find the courage to tell you how I felt. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and months into years. I watched you care for your mother with such devotion, such selflessness. I watched other men fail to see what was right in front of them, and I kept waiting." Eleanor's eyes were filling with tears. "Why did you never say anything?" "I was afraid," Samuel admitted. "Afraid you would reject me. afraid I was not good enough for you. And then my father got sick and I had to take over the ranch, and there was never enough time." He reached across the table and took her hand in his. His touch was warm and gentle. "When your mother passed, I knew I could not wait any longer. I have wasted too many years already. I did know. T want to waste another day." A tear slipped down Eleanor's cheek. "You cannot mean this. I am plain. I am old. I have nothing to offer you." Samuel squeezed her hand. "You are the kindest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You have a heart full of love and a spirit that has endured hardship without becoming bitter. You are everything I have ever wanted, and I will spend the rest of my life telling you that, if you will let me." Eleanor could not hold back her tears any longer. They flowed freely down her face, but for the first time in longer than she could remember, they were tears of joy. "I had given up," she whispered. "I thought no one would ever want me. I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone." "Never," Samuel said fiercely. "If you will have me, you will never be alone again." In that moment, something broke open inside Eleanor. All the years of loneliness, of quiet despair, of watching life pass her by, they all fell away like autumn leaves in the wind. She looked at this man who had loved her in silence for 15 years, who had waited patiently while she fulfilled her duty to her mother, who had finally found the courage to speak when he feared it might be too late. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling but sure. "Yes, I will have you." Samuel lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it softly, his eyes bright with unshed tears of his own. "I will make you happy, Eleanor. I promise you that." The weeks that followed were the happiest of Eleanor's life. Samuel courted her properly, with flowers and Sunday dinners and long walks beneath the stars. He introduced her to his horses and showed her every corner of his ranch. He spoke of his dreams for the future, dreams that now included her in every detail. The town of Cedar Hollow watched with knowing smiles. Mrs. Whitmore at the general store said she had seen it coming for years. The P.R. Eacher's wife claimed she had prayed for exactly this outcome. Even the young women who had once overlooked Eleanor now spoke to her with warmth and genuine affection. 3 months after that first dinner, Samuel proposed. They were standing on the hill behind his ranch house, watching the sun set behind the mountains, when he dropped to one knee and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band, the same ring his father had given his mother 50 years before. "Eleanor Hayes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I have loved you for half my life. I want to love you for the rest of it. Will you marry me?" 1,000 times yes. They were married in the little church with the tall steeple on a crisp autumn day when the leaves were turning gold and red. Eleanor wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame. Samuel wore a suit that looked uncomfortable on his rancher's body, but his smile never wavered. The entire town attended. Mrs. Whitmore wept into her handkerchief. The baker brought a cake 3 layers tall. Children scattered flower petals along the aisle, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, a cheer went up that could be heard all the way to the purple mountains on the horizon. That night, as Eleanor stood at the window of what was now her home, she watched the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Samuel came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on top of her head. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "I am thinking about all the years I spent believing I would never have this," Eleanor said. "I am thinking about how close I came to spending my whole life alone." Samuel turned her gently to face him. "But you did not. You are here. You are my wife, and I intend to spend every day showing you how grateful I am for that." Eleanor reached up and touched his face, tracing the lines that the sun and wind had etched into his skin. "I love you, Samuel Cooper. I love you, Eleanor Cooper." She smiled at the sound of her new name, Eleanor Cooper. It felt right. It felt like home. The years that followed were full of joy. Eleanor filled the ranch house with warmth and laughter. Samuel taught her to ride horses and tend cattle. They worked side by side during the day and sat together by the fire at night, talking about everything and nothing until the stars wheeled overhead. And when, at 34 years old, Eleanor gave birth to their first child, a daughter with her father's dark hair and her mother's gentle eyes, she finally understood that some dreams do not die. They simply wait. They wait for the right moment, the right person, the right leap of faith. She named the baby Hope. 2 years later came a son, then another daughter. The house that had once been too quiet for one man was now filled with the sounds of children playing, of meals being shared, of a family living and loving and growing together. Samuel never stopped looking at Eleanor the way he had that first night at dinner. Even when her hair began to turn gray and her face showed the marks of time, he still saw the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. He still heard the sound of her laughter on the wind. And Eleanor never stopped being grateful for every morning she woke up beside him, for every evening they spent watching the sun set behind the mountains, for every moment of this life she had never dared to hope for. She had thought no one would marry her. She had believed her chance at love had passed her by forever. But he had been waiting. Through all the lonely years, through all the silent longing, he had been waiting for her. And in the end, the wait had been worse. Every single day. On the night of their 20th wedding anniversary, Samuel and Eleanor sat together on the porch of the ranch house, watching their grandchildren chase fireflies across the yard. The air was warm and sweet, carrying the scent of wildflowers from the meadow below. "Do you remember the day I asked you to dinner?" Samuel asked, his hand finding hers in the darkness. Eleanor laughed softly. "I thought I had imagined it. I thought surely you must have meant to ask someone else." "There was never anyone else," Samuel said. "There was only ever you." Eleanor leaned her head against his shoulder, her heart full to bursting. She had spent so many years believing she was invisible, unworthy, destined for solitude. But love had found her anyway. Quiet, patient, steadfast love that had waited in the wings until she was ready to see it. She closed her eyes and listened to the sounds of her family all around her. The laughter of grandchildren, the gentle creaking of the old porch swing, the steady heartbeat of the man beside her. This was her life. This was her story. And it was more beautiful than anything she had ever dared to dream. Some people believe that love belongs only to the young, that it must be seized quickly or lost forever. But Eleanor Hayes Cooper knew better. She knew that true love does not follow rules or timelines. It does not give up when the path is difficult. It does not wither in the face of doubt or fear. True love waits, and when it finally arrives, it is worth everything. The end.